Okay, so I think we are live. Welcome everybody to the node.js Security Working Group meeting. It's the last from May, and the house is full, 8 people. Before I start, does anybody have any announcement? I would like also to ask you to include your name to the minutes I have sent in the chat. Please add your name there. I'm adding mine. Yep. And as usual, we normally go to the vulnerability review and open SSL scorecard monitor review. Okay. So let me turn off the smartphone. Okay. Going to the Node.js dependency vulnerability assessment. Basically, I don't think we have any update there, right, Michael?
Yeah, there's nothing new reported, although we do know that there's some public ones in one of the dependencies. Not quite sure why they haven't shown up, so we'll wait for. We'll see if they show up
probably
next week or so. Yeah. If not, we should maybe think about if there's something to look at there. But yeah, otherwise, no update than that.
Okay, it's too early to close all the 19 ones, right? Because 19 will be end of life June 1st.
Yeah, I think we might as well just wait till then we can update the automation to stop looking at 19 and close it.
Sure. All right. The second one is the Open SSF scorecard monitor review. The link is the one that I will send in the chat.
Yeah, I made well for the first time in a long time is working the the pipeline. So now it's kind of making the pull request. So that's cool. I added a small analysis a little bit after. So in general lines, basically the security working group and Node has no changes in terms of scoring or reporting. So it's the same as 2 weeks ago. For Undici, we have an increase of 0.7 points, which is due to the SAST implementation, which already has 6 commits. So I expect this to grow. So when we arrive to 29, I think we get the full point for that. So that's okay. And also all the dependencies are pinned now. So that's fantastic. And also I want to take the opportunity to let Lauren introduce himself because he's from the OpenSSF scorecard project and so on. And he was super curious to join us and help us a little bit with some of the questions that we have in the past. So let him to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Julius. I'm Laurent. I work on the OpenSSF scorecard and Salsa projects. I'm from Google, so I also work with Rui sometimes. I was invited today because we're trying to improve some of the scorecard project, and I thought I wanted to give you some heads up about what we're trying to do, and maybe get some early feedback from you guys to tell me if it looks like it's going in the right direction or whether we should change course. Yeah. Do I have like 10 minutes to like do a little demo or?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess all of you are familiar with the scorecard project.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So some of the things that we're trying to improve in scorecard, there's basically 2 directions that we are exploring. So the first one is to help maintainers configure scorecard on their GitHub repository. So basically a configuration option for the scorecard action, where you would be able to disable or enable some checks, either the entire check or maybe more granular by having an annotation in the file. For example, if you don't want to pin I'm making this up, like a GitHub action, one particular GitHub action, you could go in the file and add a comment saying, hey, do not create alerts for this. So that's the first direction that we are exploring. And then the second one that we're looking at is making it easier for consumers to automate some of the decision that they make based on the scorecard results. So today, when you run scorecard, basically what you get is a score which isn't very granular, and then you get a bunch of strings, but it doesn't really tell you, exactly what happened in the check. So, for example, if I look at the fuzzing check, it's going to tell you if you have fuzzing enabled, but it's really hard to tell whether you enabled it with OSS fuzz or CI fuzz or cluster fuzz or whatever other fuzzing thing. And so we want to add some granularity into what, in the results, so that people can then tell exactly what happened in the check. So the direction number 1 is just something that we want to tackle this year, but we haven't started the design. And the second part is something that we already have a design for, a POC, and we are starting to implement. And I can give you like a short example, a small 2-3 minute demo of what it looks like, if my audio works and the share screen feature works.
Yep.
So let me try to do that. If my audio cuts off, please tell me. I've had issues in the past with Zoom, so just let me know.
Sure.
Right. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you see my screen being shared?
Yes.
Yep.
As well? Okay, great. Thanks. All right. So this is like a small terminal. And what I was saying earlier is that when you run scorecard today, basically what you get is, the details are like this. And so unless you do some sort of regex on the string, you're not able to tell what's really going on. So what we want to enable instead is something where the detail is going to show up as a more structured format, basically like this. So this is still the same results as earlier, but for every check. So in this concept, what I didn't say is a check is basically broken down into smaller pieces that we call probes. So as you can see here, the check is made up of multiple probes. The one that checks for one fuzz, cluster fuzz, go native, and so on and so forth. And so by looking at the detail, you'll be able to figure out exactly what succeeded and what failed. And then in each of the probe, we'll give you additional information, such as like step-by-step remediation, the efforts, the amount of effort that we believe you have to make in order to resolve the problem, and so on and so forth. So I don't want to go too much into detail, but within the scorecard project, we will have a configuration file for each of the probes, so that users can add their own probes if they want. So that's the first thing that we're doing. And then the next thing that I want to talk about quickly is we're also looking at enabling people to define their own checks, basically by combining the probes any way they'd like. So for example, if continuing on the fuzzing check, if you only care about, say, CI fuzz and cluster fuzz, but you don't care about the other kind of fuzzers that we are looking for, you could basically create your own check. Let me show you an example of the configuration. So this is the file that you would basically write, where you'd say, okay, here is, I want to check for fuzzing. So currently it's looking for all of those, and it combines them with an OR statement. But if you wanted to just look at, say, I don't know, those two, you'd basically remove those from the statement, and it would automatically disappear. And so we have another format that will enable this. So here you can see that it basically shows a similar format as the previous result that I showed, but you'll have the ability to basically define your own checks if you want, based on probes that we can add that maybe the community wants to have, but that maybe we don't run by default in Scorecard, but you'll be able to do that. I think that's the end of my demo. I don't know if you have any questions, clarification.
I have a question. This basically currently is a CLI, but eventually will be integrated in a CI. So we should run on every pull request, right?
Yeah. You mean for Scorecard?
Yep.
Yeah. So we actually already support running Scorecard on pull request. We haven't officially announced it because it's not well tested, but it should work. So you can do that today if you go to the GitHub action and you add the trigger event pull request, it should work.
Okay. For instance, if the CI, if in the CI, I just want to check if the Python dependencies are still there, I can do it.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, because for the case of node.js, I don't think having all the checks in all the pull requests would make sense.
Yeah. So when I say that Scorecard is supported on pull request, it's actually only supported for checks that look at files, because everything else is an API, so basically, let's say that you find that you have code review that is not done in a pull request. That's a bad example, but let me say contributors. No, that's also a bad example. Basically, the TLDR is that we only look at things that you can fix within a pull request, on a pull request. Otherwise, you could be blocking on the run of Scorecard. Like if you marked it as blocking as a blocking pre-submit, you wouldn't be able to actually fix it via a pull request unless it's a file, because in pull request you only have files. So right now, if you enable Scorecard on pull request, it will only enable pin permission. No, sorry, pin dependency, and I think token permissions, and maybe a few other checks that only look at files.
Okay.
And then it'll show you a diff on the pull request, whether there's something that was introduced in the pull request or not. And that's something that's done by GitHub automatically. As you create the SARI file, GitHub does the diff and provides a diff in the pull request.
All right.
You can probably stop sharing screen, Laura, if you're not going to show anything else.
Yeah, I guess in our case, we need something that is triggered, something like the code owners plugin that we have. So only when something is a specific change is made on some part of the code base, some checks are triggered, and we might want something like this only if you change some parts of the application, not for every pull request, for example.
Yeah, that's very good feedback. I don't think we've considered this.
But that can be, we can filter it by using the GitHub Actions. There is a regex we can use on the top. So whenever you touch in workflows file, it will run this trigger. So I think we can do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. One last question from my side. So, for example, in the case of Node, if we in the Node core itself, if we want, for example, remove the check related to the branch protection, because right now we don't have it branch protection, and let's say we don't want to do it, and we don't want to have that negative score. So if we remove it from the check, basically when we run the checks, we are going to have like the full scoring, like 10 points. Let's say if everything is perfect except the branch protection, and we remove the branch protection, we will get the 10 points around what we are checking, right? No, based on like comparison to the general one. I'm not very sure if I made my point clear, but
so I think what you're saying is if you disable it in the GitHub action, and I thought that you were actually using it as a CLI in your case.
No, I think we use it with the GitHub action, if I remember.
Oh,
well.
okay.
Yeah.
But where do you get the information from in the in your report, like the weekly report?
With the reports, we get it from the API, from the scorecard API.
Yeah. So in the GitHub action, so I don't think there's a way right now that you can disable the branch protection check inside the action. That's something that we want to do. Although I mean I think we could hack something, like we have something for GitHub where they wanted to enable it internally, and you know, there are ways to do it. But so once we have the configuration file, yeah, the score within your repository will just be without the check.
Okay.
And so it will not show up in the scanning dashboard. However, the one that you will receive from the API will still be the universal, score. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just thinking that's interesting. Like, so basically you disable it, we would just see the score minus that, but then everybody else would be seeing a different score. It's an interesting, like, it's almost like I'm wondering if you want to show both somehow, like, you know, a big number, which is the one that shows your disabled stuff, but then in brackets, like, this is what everybody else sees, or figure out a way to, like, display the score, but then say, but these things have been turned off or something. Like, you know, you have 10 out of 10, but the project said that blah, blah, and blah don't apply. I don't know. It's a tough.
Yeah. So yeah, no, this is a good point. So something I didn't mention is that in the more structured result that I showed about, like, for maintainers, sorry, for consumers, we're going to be also reporting things that have been disabled from the maintainer side. So once we have the configuration option on the maintainer side, every result, especially those that fail, will have an annotation or something where we will basically report what the user has disabled and why. And we're hoping that the annotation system will be able to take, like, a user string or something that indicates the reason why they disabled it.
Yeah.
And we also have a link, like, we'll report also the file path to where they added this comment, so that someone who consume the scorecard results can actually go back to the repository if they want to understand whether they are okay with this or whether they disagree. Kind of try to have this bi-directional communication channel, because I think right now it's mostly like consumers going to maintainers and saying you're doing something wrong, and maintainers are not able to indicate like some of the decisions that they've made, because sometimes like you say, it doesn't apply to some project. So we're trying to go in that direction. With regard to the score, we can have two scores as well. That's fine.
Yeah, it almost seems like, you know, from the consumer, the easiest might be like a maintainer score and raw score or something, right? With a good explanation that says, like, maintainers can disable things that they don't apply. So this is the score that the maintainer believes is appropriate. This is the score with everybody turned on. And here's the things that are turned off. Yeah, like, so I could easily see, like, yeah, Node is giving itself a 10 out of 10. And then, but wait a sec, it only get a 3 if you actually turned everything on. And okay, I can look at that and say, yeah, well, I trust, like, I could either just say, well, I trust the Node project, so I'm going to take that 10. Or if it's somebody else, I could say, let's look through and see, yeah, they turned off those things. I like you said, the explanations make sense to me.
Yeah. So what you're saying is having a summary, because the way that right now we have it, we've thought about it, and maybe not enough, is like every result will have an annotation and will basically point you, but I don't think we've thought about having this summary section, and maybe that's useful to have a quick glance at the overall result. Yeah, so that's definitely something I'll take back.
Okay, because yeah, I can see lots of people just looking at the top level number or something, but that is a bit hard to balance that. Hey, you could just turn it off and get a perfect score, right? Versus
All right. just a side note here, Steve, about the OpenSSF scorecard. The ONDG increased because I did a pull request using the step security to increase the scorecard, the overall scorecard. And honestly, I was expecting a bit more than 0.7 of difference. But we need to check the report to see what's missing. Probably is due to the LLHTTP because of binaries, WebAssembly binaries. Anyway, that's good. That's good. That increased. All
that
right.
might be a good question on the binary side of things too. Like that's one where, you know, it's not something, we're not going to remove those binaries, right? So there's some binaries you could look at and say, okay, yeah, that's something to do. Other ones, you know, we've decided we're using WebAssembly. So I don't know what the thought would be on that in terms of like, could you exclude specific ones and say we've reviewed them and those make sense versus the unreviewed, thanks for the info.
If this is a question for me, that's definitely something we want to have in the configuration of scorecard, because that's like the most common request and complaint, that some binaries are there just for unit testing, so we need to be able to disable them. So yeah, that's that will be enabled once we have the configuration option.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so either you disable them or you deposit a hash and check if like a checksum and check if it corresponds. So like, so this would allow like trusted binaries to be in the project, for example. So just a suggestion.
All right, let's move on to the official agenda now. The first item is the issue 989, is the nomination of Ashish. Just before moving on, and in the next meeting you become a member, I just need to know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
You are Ashish. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. So the issue is open for 1 week, and we don't have any objections, just +1. So Michael, I sent you a message just to check if that method is the right approach to invite someone to the group that is not part of the Node.js organization. I don't know if I need to do something different.
Let me just see. Yes, yeah, I think that's it. Basically, yeah, you invite them to the security working group. It will give them access to the org, but that should be about it, I think.
Okay. Don, you should have received an email, Ashish, from the Node.js org. So when you accept, you be part of the Node.js organization plus the security working group team. So welcome. I will close the issue.
Thank you. Super
Congratulations.
excited. Thank you.
The next issue is, I think, is a sequence of issues created by Ulysses.
Yeah, I can explain that a little bit. Yeah, all of those are related to the OpenSSF CII best practices. So if you remember, we have been discussing about the entry level and then the silver level. So it has been tons of discussions in commits. Thank you, Marco, a lot for your feedback on most of them. I tried to extract some of them and put it separately, because it seems interesting, although we maybe solve it for the pull request itself, but worth exploring a little bit. So those are the requirements, pseudots, whatever. All of this is tagged with the CII best practices. I didn't expect all of them to jump into the agenda. So I was thinking as we can leave it for the end if you want, just because if I jump to everything now, we may not have space for the rest. So we can jump to the end of the agenda, this topic, and we can discuss it a little bit more about the entry level, silver, where we are, and so on. if that's okay for all of you.
Okay. So I will go directly to the issue 984, that is access to secure tab in GitHub key projects. I saw that that issue. However, this is, let me see.
Yeah, I think it
Okay,
was
basically-
originally. Yeah, go ahead.
But basically, what are you asking is that all the members from the security working group have access to that tab, right?
Yeah, that was the end. The last meeting we discussed it a little bit if between Thomas
Okay.
and myself is if makes sense for us to check out that security tab just in case that there are some warnings or stuff that we are not monitoring or not being aware of in another directions. But yeah, and then I think I saw some comments from Tobias. I think Tobias saying that probably we are aware of what's going on already. So in other directions, but yeah, I was not very sure if we need it, because I think actually we can access, at least myself, I can access to the security tab on the security working group repo, but not in others. And I think the same for Thomas and the same for many of us. So, and also I'm not sure how much we are losing actually. So worth checking.
I think to have access to other repositories, you should have access. You should have write access to the other repositories, if I remember correctly. And well, basically, I kind of agree with Tobias that probably what we will see there is the same that we will see in the scorecard report.
Yeah.
Honestly, I looked at to the Node.js one. I looked at to this. The code scanning in the security working group and basically is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think maybe we are not losing information right now. So maybe we can just close it for now. And if we discover a use case that validates it, then we can reopen it and discuss it again. But if not, we can just close it.
Okay. Yeah, and there is just a security concern about allowing access to the wholly secured working group, because when you have access to the security tab, you have access to the security advisors too. So it means that whenever someone report a vulnerability, these people in the group will see it.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. So can I close the issue?
Yeah. I think we can close it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Jessica said and closed. I don't know how we close it, but yeah, after I can provide some information. And then we have the CII that I will skip for now to go in the same requirement. Then we have the permission model roadmap. Basically, there is one issue that appears in the last week. That was, well, first, I think Marco was researching about including
path resolve.
Path resolve
on the C++ side.
Did you stop the work? How?
Yeah, it's basically on hold for the moment because I had some issues with mostly because I'm not very familiar with C++, but the problem was getting the current work directory in an asynchronous way, so I might need some help on that part. But I will resume the work after this week.
Okay. The second one is that, let me see exactly the nickname or the name, Dion, I don't know how to pronounce, but was working on a pull request to include environment permissions to the permission model. However, a few folks raised some concerns about the usability of this feature. And well, after reading a bit, after thinking for some time, I also agree that might make no sense, or at least it haven't proved useful to have environment permissions. Basically is to have a process.env dot something that will restrict access. For instance, I just want to allow access to the environment permission of home or AWS credentials, doesn't matter. In my point of view, I agree that it will be equally complex, like very complex, to include that feature without raising other security vulnerabilities. And I doubt that someone will use it often. At least we didn't receive any feedback about that. And and I would like to bring that discussion about what we want to bring to the permission model, because as Tobias mentioned in the issue, Dino was created around the security. So since day zero, security was in the top of their minds. So it means it's very easy to include and remove features in that scope, as far as I can tell. However, in Node.js, when we include a new feature, we know that if we're touching something, we might break the whole world. And the inclusion of the environment permission, for me, is something that doesn't make sense for now. What do you guys think?
Maybe I oversimplify things, but as soon as you can control the file system access, right, and the network access with the flags that we already have in place, even if you can access to, let's say, sensitive information in the environment, you know, like password of MongoDB connection or whatever, then you don't have anything to do with that, you know, because you cannot bring that information outside because you don't have access to the network, and you cannot store it elsewhere because you don't have access to the file system. So as soon as the execution finishes, even if you have access momentarily to that information, you don't have a lot to do. I mean, if we can create a good, you know, attack vector for that, that is not covered by other flags, maybe makes sense to have something around it. But the other case, I think, is hard to.
Yeah, because I mean, if an attacker could exploit the process.env dot something, it could do monkey patching and something else that, you know.
Yeah,
I agree that I think we should focus primarily on net and file system.
Yeah.
The net will be difficult, I guess, without including overhead, but it's something that I think would be great, at least for the as an initial concept, just blocking HTTP or TCP requests, and then we can do it more granular. For instance, I want to block TCP package, inbound TCP package on a specific port, but I think we can only achieve this with a root table or something in the Linux or in the kernel of each environment without going in the software side. Well, that's it. That's the update from the environment variables. So
I guess in terms of that one, like it's sort of maybe in priorities, I could see like getting socket going might be a priority. But it does, I mean, often secrets and stuff are in the environment. And so I do wonder a little bit, like if there's going to be something that's providing a sandbox that does, if you don't need access to the environment, then seems like something that you might want to restrict.
Yeah, the problem is that it will include, it will add a complexity in the Node.js source code, because we use it, we use some environment variables internally, and if we block it, it means that how can we give access to the Node.js internals without exposing it to the attacker or something? And honestly, if you just do object.freeze or something, or the process.env.delete in the beginning of a process, that should be the same, right?
So, but say, I don't quite follow that in terms of like
Sorry.
the doing a delete, how that.
No, I mean, if you don't want, if you want to basically remove all the credentials or don't have access to the credentials, might make sense in the beginning of your application. You just you see all the environment variables and delete them. Of course, someone can create it in runtime by adding something, but if you don't want to expose it, probably the best practice would be whenever I use the environment variable, I delete it after that, and that's gone.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, the attacker could read the environment variable before you use it. That's
right, and I don't think that like that doesn't help. So say, for example, like npm install scripts, you wanted to somehow say like that, you know, have the sandbox help with that. It's probably not going to help with that kind of case, right? Because you don't have, you're basically saying wrap your application with some code that adds some of the protections around it, right?
Yeah.
But like in terms of priority, I mean, you know, there's lots of things.
Yeah, I mean,
that can be done. I'm not saying it's the top priority one, but I do see that like secrets are often in the environment variables, and so it's interesting from that perspective, at least a bit.
I have a quick question around
yeah.
Like what is the threat model? So when you say you delete the environment variable, like they are actually not deleted, right? If I then create a huge array, basically like when you do what is it, heap spray, can you, I suppose the arrays are not initialized, so you basically get the uninitialized bytes that might correspond to a secret that was there before. I mean, I don't know to what length you're trying to go with the sandboxing. I'm just curious.
When I meant deleting the environment variable, is just the process.env object that holds all the environment variables that node.js process initialize. So, for instance,
so it would still so it's still in memory basically. I mean, it's basically like in crypto. Typically, when you say unset, you can unlink a file or you can unset an environment variable, but it's still the data is still available if you really are able to read memory, the process memory. And so if you were, yeah, I mean, I'm just curious, like what the threat model is.
Well, I'm not sure if it will be in the memory if you delete it.
It certainly can be, right? Like unless you actually have something which does like an overwrite, or I mean, to make sure that it's truly gone. But I think that to giving Laurent some context, I think at this point, the base Node.js threat model is we trust the code you run, but the permissions model is meant to give you like additional sort of seatbelts and airbags and stuff to say, you know, you can add some extra protection, but we're not at the point where we're changing the node security model to say, hey, that's going to protect you from everything yet.
Yeah, and well, the approach of deleting key in the process.env is like is something to avoid. Okay, just I just gave an example. If someone is listening on YouTube, please don't do that. Well. So Michael, do you think that the allowed env is something that might be desirable for users?
I just like my thought is I do know that there's secrets there, right? And like if you're trying to contain what the code can get at, like, you know, so example, you can say like, hey, I'm going to prevent you from reading the etc. password file because there's secrets in that, you know, potential secrets in that. Environment variables do have sensitive things in it, so I guess in my mind I'm just saying like I wouldn't rule it out as something interesting at some point. Not saying it's a top priority versus other things like sockets control might be higher in my list, but
But to offer that protection, we should have an attack vector. But I couldn't see an attack vector exploiting the process.env variables.
For me, it would be like just go through them and try and pull out secrets.
But in order to do that, the attacker should have access to the Node.js process already, right? Like should be able to run untrusted code.
Right, but I guess the same applies to, like, you know, if you're the file system protections, right? What's the difference in the attack vector from that one? You know, we're basically saying there's some code, you know, so our base model is, yeah, we trust the code you've asked us to run, but, you know, the permission model is like just an extra layer of things like, okay, you've run this code and we're going to say, no, it can't access the file system.
Yeah, I was wondering, okay, yeah, the problem is third-party package, but third-party package could read the environment variables, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Or
just,
if you
I
try
think
to
it's similar.
change one,
Hmm.
if you try to change the value of a environment variable, and for some reason it is evaluated at runtime again, could do some nasty stuff.
I was just thinking
Okay.
of the simple one of reading
Yeah.
them and saying, okay, now I've got your database token, or
Okay. I will
obviously
raise
most
the
applications are
concern
going to
that issue.
need something from the environment, but that's
Okay, that makes sense now. Well, I'll move forward just because we have a lot of items in the agenda. But I will paste your comment in the issue.
Can I say something real quick? Another
Yeah.
threat model that it's a little easier is if you don't consider things that are running in the that you're running to be malicious, but basically if you just want to reduce what happens when you have a vulnerability. So in that case, in a vulnerability, you don't have actually malicious code running, but someone is exploiting. Let's say you have a web server and you have a directory traversal. In this case, you can have a weaker threat model where you just say, I'm going to stop, reading. I'm just going to say which files you have access to, but I'm not trying to stop someone from. I mean, I'm not assuming that there's remote code execution. I'm just assuming that there will be bugs, and I want to basically just follow least privilege principle so that, at least I cannot read .ssh password and things like that. And then maybe that could be a first step before you go like to sandboxing.
I think that's a good way to look at it, right? Like the less you have access to, the less mistakes you could make, right? So like if you, for example, if you printed out all the environment variables in your code for debugging, maybe you expose something sensitive. So if you don't have access to them, you won't be able to accidentally do it versus if you're actually actively trying to circumvent protections, then it's a lot harder, a lot bigger issue.
Okay. So there is one issue about a new update. Possibly a discussion about policy integration on Windows will be skipped because Bradley is not here. The automation of updates of all dependencies. Do you have anything, something to share, Marco?
Yes. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Andrea that helped me with some improvements on the previous dependency update. He opened 3 pull requests in 1 week. Like, great job. Just want to congratulate with him. You want to say something, Andrea?
Yes, thank you. Just a few words to thank you everybody to invite me here. So I meet Marco a couple of weeks ago, and he invited me to be here today. I just started with the 3 simple tasks to work on, so I am at the really beginning right now. I need to study the project a lot before. And that's it. Thank you for inviting me. And sorry for because my webcam is broken.
No worries.
Okay.
All
Yeah,
right. So on the other hand, I opened today the pull request for the last dependency update automation, which was histogram. It has been blocked for quite some time, but I updated to a version that has the version header. It was I was able to check which was the current version, and today I opened the pull request. So if you could leave a review later, it would be great. I will post in chat later. And so on one topic that I want to discuss is about the back part of dependency update automation. So I opened a draft pull request last week, but I received negative feedback about it because from basically the release working group, because what they said is basically we don't need to have more pull requests for backports because you can simply cherry pick the commit and include it in the previous release branch. So it would be useful in a way, but it would create so much noise because for every dependency update, that would be like at least 2-3 pull requests, one for every active release branch, and that's something that we don't want. They don't want. So
yeah,
sorry, Rafa.
the idea of the backport is not for all the dependencies. It's just for the dependencies that does not match the main version. For instance, OpenSSL on the main version is OpenSSL 3, but OpenSSL on the Node.js 16 is OpenSSL 1.1. So we should have a backport in that case. But just for those cases, it will be for OpenSSL and possibly, I don't know, V8.
For the V8, I'm not sure because there is a specific team that takes care of that. So I would need some feedback from them. But if it's just for OpenSSL, I think that we can definitely do it because it's just like very self-contained. So yeah, I will explore this.
it would almost be like if there was a list, if somehow it said like, this is the list of things that we know are different. And because even like sometimes, I guess it's when they're different, it's because they use a different main branch. And so it would be like, okay, here's the alternate to branch. Maybe it would be like if you had a list of ones where like, 16 has a different main branch, 14 has a different main branch, and then the automation would just work on the ones that had a different alternate branch. The other thing I wonder that might be useful would be generating, and this would be something we need feedback from the releasers, but like somehow building the list of, landed PRs in main that need to go back for the dependencies. Maybe that's already obvious, like maybe they already get that, but that would be one thing I was wondering if it's like, okay, we're doing a release, let's make sure we have the PRs for all of the dependencies. How easy is that already today?
Yeah, I'm not sure about this point because I'm not part of the release work group, but I think Rafa, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, what I can tell, I think you really can add as well, but the only thing we probably need a manual backport is the OpenSSL for now. I mean, might have other dependencies that appears time to time, like in 3 months, 4 months, but for now, I would just focus on OpenSSL because very often they release secret patches, and we need to be fast on that thing.
That is definitely our biggest problem. Like you're right that like for security release, that's where we most often have to do an update, and they're different across the line. So
yeah, I guess there is no need to over-engineer it. Like we could also add the section there is a specific action that updates OpenSSL. So we can add a section to that. So to check after this, in this major release, check if there is a new patch and apply it to this release branch. That's something we could do specifically for OpenSSL. instead of doing something global. Yeah, that's something very doable, and yeah, we'll look into it.
So I know we have just 5 minutes left. There is one issue, the automation of security release process. I have created a pull request on the Node.js core you choose to automate the security proposal pull request. So I think, Rui, if you can look to it, would be great. Basically, whenever you try to create a proposal, it will fetch for all the open pull requests given the label in the private repo, and then it will amend automatically in your proposal. So you just have one command, and then your proposal should be ready. That's the idea.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I will test it in the next security release. So Ulysses, I think we won't have time to discuss the CI best practice, but do you have any, do you need any help on that? Like, is one
just one particular thing only. If you can have a look on the pull request 954 offline, don't worry. Mostly for, I think, Marco, Michael, Richard, and Tobias to check it out, the comments. I think I solved most of them, but there are some discussions like pending to close just to confirm that's okay and so on. So if we can close that 4 conversations that they are there, we are good to go. And obviously the approvals of the pull request, but we are good to go, I think, with at least the entry level.
Okay. Okay. That sounds great. Yeah, sorry, I didn't have time to look to it. I'm doing a lot of things recently. And well, another thing is there's one issue that is one of our initiative, assessment against best practices. But given that we have included it in your announcement, the OpenSF scorecard monitor review, I think we can close that one, right? Or okay, no, actually, this is
it's like an umbrella
for the CIE. Yeah, sorry. No, that's
it's fine. An umbrella, yeah.
Okay, I will fill the minutes with all the things we discussed, and that's it. Anything else to share? I think we are good, right? Okay. Thank you, folks, for joining. Hope to see you guys in 2 weeks. And again, welcome, Ashish. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Looking forward.
Bye-bye.